Hello and welcome to any combo lords joining me here. It's a rainy day here where I'm at in California, and so we're doing a little video in my room because I didn't manage to get any content out yesterday. And although it's a wild task to try and get out content most days, it's something I don't just do for other people, but it's also a motivational activity for myself that keeps me busy in a happy way. I also try and get my episodes out on the main channel to get my fuller, more in-depth ideas when possible. And there will be one of those coming out in just a few hours at about 6 o'clock my time, which is in a little under 4 hours from now. I will be dropping an episode on the main channel called The Pandigital Paradox. And it's all about this type of thing called pandigital numbers, and as well as some paradoxical traits of them. And not everyone likes the word paradox. Some people like to claim that certain things are not a paradox because there is an explanation for them. But things that don't really grapple with human reasoning or our ability to comprehend things and seem to have some sort of clash in their logical structure, I do like to call paradox. It's a fun word. And so this episode will be about a lot of fun facts about pandigital numbers, and then about this sort of paradoxical trait that they have as far as their true importance. And we'll give some sneak previews and extra contents about those topics in today's video. So this is somewhat of a prequel to the... There's going to be a lot of P's here. Somewhat of a prequel to looking at pandigital primes, perfect powers, polydivisible numbers, persistent numbers. What else you got in the P's? There's a lot more. They have a lot of P's all over. Palindromic numbers, positive numbers. There's a lot of P's all over math. It's a very common starter for the number nicknames, I guess. And so today's will slightly be a prequel to that, but it's also just going to not spoil the main thesis behind the episode, give just some more backdrop to some of those fun traits that we can overlap with these pandigital numbers, and explain a little more of that. So for people who see this in the future and have already watched that episode, this will also work as a sequel as opposed to a prequel. So, depending on your time zone and your time of watching things, is either a sequel or a prequel. In any case, make sure you have your notifications on for the main channel that's just combo class, because that will be where that episode drops. Now, a lot of people ask why I have two channels. Well, I started this as like a shorts channel, and when I started that last year, the shorts were more clogged up. They've reorganized the structure a little more on pages, but I didn't want them to clog up my main videos, and I wanted to have one that was a little more my perfectionist ideas that I got, in my sense, fully right and artistically, and another one that was a little more of my personal playground, which this channel has become. And because of the shorts, and because it has more content on here, this channel is blown way past the main channel in subscribers, which is okay. And I may, in fact, at some point rename this channel to something like Domotro from Combo Class, or Domotro and something related to Combo Class in parentheses. I already called it at Domotro when they make you claim those at names nowadays. And I think that this just feels a little more like my personal Domotro channel, which happens to line up with a lot of the same Combo Class thoughts, as opposed to that is a little more like watching a TV show or something that you might play in a classroom, or hopefully a mix of those on my main channel. So definitely stay tuned over there for that crazy episode coming out later tonight, which will be the longest episode on the main channel yet. Even after I cut some scenes, it ended up being about 29 minutes. So it's going to be the longest episode, but it's worth it. It's not like my 2-hour streams where I kind of just do 95% on topic stream of thought processes a lot of the time. It's 29 minutes with a bit of an arc and a thesis, so you'll like that. And some of the things that we're going to look at today as little sort of prequels or sequels to that, depending when you watch this, are going to be well, deconstructing the title, apart from the word the, which will be pretty hard to deconstruct. In fact, for fun, let's try and see how the dictionary defines the word the. It's an interesting rabbit hole, possibly. So let's shrink me over here. And out of curiosity, let's see, how does the definition? So the is denoting one or more things already mentioned or assumed to be common knowledge. It's funny because you can't define the without using words much more complicated than the. So this is like if someone didn't know that word, the, but they knew the word denoting. So there's a lot of ways they have to try and define the. So we're not going to go into that part. We're going to go into looking at what it could mean to be pandigital, as for pandigital numbers. And we are going to look at what it could mean to be a paradox. But I'm going to an article called List of Paradoxes, so we'll find some fun examples on there. Now, before we jump into these, I did mention also in the description that today is a little bit of a combo class anniversary, which is a little random, but the combo class anniversary it happens to be, which I'm going to give a little chat about the numbers involved before I interact with the comments, which I will do in a minute, which I don't really care about an anniversary on a day of the month quite as much. While that can be good, and for example, the 13th of months is very special to me for personal reasons. Not a birthday, but it's an important event in my life. I think it's more important maybe to look at years or days from something, or moons even, if you can calculate how many moon cycles, because those would be a little more fundamental than the calendar we happen to choose, where February 13th is only 28 days usually from March 13th, but from January 13th to February 13th would be like 31 days, so it's a different amount each time. However, the day is actually a concrete unit, and so sometimes I like to look up how many days have passed since a given thing. Here, for example, is a time and date calculator I'll often use. And I'll plug in some date that was important in my life and today's date and see how long it's been in various different forms. Like if I wonder, how long has it been that I've been posting on this channel? Well, I started that just posting last September, because this was just my bonus channel before it sort of became my Domotro side channel. And that was 2022. So today, and if we include the end date, that'll be saying today is the that's day, like that and th day. And if we don't include it, it'll be that's how many days have happened. So we sort of have two possible ones to look out for a fun fact in. That's not an extraordinarily simple or interesting one on any of these, although I'm sure you could deconstruct them in fun ways. But what I did find today was an interesting amount of days since I had first posted anything related to Combo Class online, which actually was because of, I'm going to slide this intermittent fasting ad out of the way, although it is, as we saw in an earlier stream, apparently International Fasting Month, but it's also International Snack Food Month, so those are clashing a little bit. Anyway, the amount of days that was interesting today was since I first posted anything related to Combo Class online, which was actually last April 11th, and it wasn't on YouTube. I had made the Combo Class YouTube channel maybe, or maybe I hadn't even made it yet at that point. Not this channel I certainly hadn't made, but I had been editing the intro for the Combo Class channel. And looking back at when that was, if we look up Combo Class, and maybe that's just because they remember who I am, but I like the fact that we're starting to get on those upper results when you just look up Combo Class. And if we look back at when these videos happened, this one that was posted 9 months ago on May 2nd last year, I was editing that and finished the edit with the guy Aaron who I filmed it with on April 11th. And I waited to post it until I had these next one or two edited also. But I had only filmed a couple of them at that point, only filmed up to maybe that lunch break, and was editing that. And that guy, Aaron, who I was filming with, was like, why not just film a few things to post on TikTok for fun while you have all these ideas on your head? And I was like, why not? And it got me into posting shorts. I never like going on TikTok. I'm not a user of it, but I like posting on there. Nowadays, just the same videos that the bonus channel gets here. But once in a while, there's one that makes sense to be on just one app or the other, but usually not. There are some videos back on that TikTok that didn't end up on the bonus channel. So there's a few extra ones if anyone wants to scroll through there. And I may scroll through them at some point to make sure I've put all my favorites on the bonus channel, because there might be a couple of old ones I still want to repost of my favorites that somehow didn't get on YouTube yet. But when I posted those, it was technically the first combo class footage ever posted online. And in fact, just for fun, let's watch it. Sorry, YouTube, I love you way more. I don't know why they can't find it. We don't need to watch it, but it's an old video just where I say, hi, I'm Domotro. And it's, that was the first footage I put out of combo class online. And I put out a couple random facts about nines that ended up in that 9 episode. And if we include today, it is the 300th day. Which also makes nice amounts of hours and minutes and stuff, because those multiply up to keep those zeros and threvenness and stuff. Now, funny thing about 300. If we look up the number 300 here, it's one of the first ones that they mention after a little gap. It gets its own article, but the last one they did was 290. And 288 got its own article. But 300... its prime factorization, which is one of the very key ways to look at numbers, is 2 squared times 3 times 5 squared. So the funny thing is that although 300 looks really threeven, it looks like a super divisible by 3 number, it's like less threeven than the other primes amount. 3 to the first power, but 2 and 5 got a second power. So it's actually not that threeven for a number with 5 small primes in its factorization. Sometimes our base can trick you with how things come out to be looked and written. So 300 isn't even the most threeveny number, but it is a triangular number, which is pretty neat. And that means that it's the sum of some first amount of numbers. And if we look at the triangular numbers to see which one it is, let's see. It is the 24th, so it's the sum of the first 24 numbers, gives you 300. And funny enough, if you square 300, we get one of the other numbers after a gap on the list here, which is already blue because we looked at that for passing that in subscribers. But this is 300 squared. And when you square a triangular number, you get a number that is also the sum of that many cubes separately. It's a really cool identity. We're going to go into visual demonstrations of this when it shows up on the main channel. But I have mentioned the identity itself before, which is that if you take a triangular number, we'll say the nth triangular number, and you square it, it's equal to all those numbers that were in the triangular number cubed separately. So if you add up the first 24 cubes, or if you add up the first 24 numbers, then square that, you get 90,000 either way. And now we have even passed the next number on this list, and maybe this one called a fine number too, but we have passed 45 cubed. And funny enough, 45 is a triangular number too. So this one's the sum of the first 9 whole numbers, then cubed. And we have passed that as well. And the automorphic one someone mentioned, we did a stream explaining, and all of these types of concepts, automorphic numbers, and what we could call figurate numbers or polygonal numbers, such as numbers that are triangular or squares of triangulars or stuff. Those numbers will show up in more depth on the main channel at some point. For now, we're going to move on from these fun numbers and wait maybe until we hit this 3 smooth Leyland number that is twice 6 to the 6th power. What I'll move on to is answering a few comments, and then we're going to look at some of those other articles about pandigital numbers and paradoxes. So, thank you all for joining me here. Someone says that I should check out Desmos, some random maybe link number, and it's all Pythagorean triples in a graph. If you have one single type of graph, it might mostly show the primitive ones, but then you can sort of draw lines through there to find where the others would be. I have seen good demonstrations of that. So Pythagorean triples are super cool. I've been sort of saving them to go into more depth before I really unveil their secret coolness, because there's a lot of cool ways to construct all of the primitive ones, including graphs like someone mentioned, and including these simple little formulas and many other ways that create these trees that are threeven, or a pure threeven number at each stage. By pure threeven, I mean my nickname for the powers of 3. And it goes like this one, which is the 3, 4, 5 right triangle, is the seed of all these. Splits into 3, they each split into 3, and those are what are called the primitive ones, where it's co-prime things so that you can't, they're the scaled down versions that could be scaled up. So, somebody asked about how I came up with the name Domotro, and well, I didn't say this before, but then it's in the credits of the main channel episodes anyway, so I've said it once or twice. My real name is Dimitri with all I's. So my real name is Dimitri. Now, I've told a little story before that is in one of the previous streams, a chapter in that, so I'm not going to go into too much depth, but basically when I was joking around with friends at some point, I thought it would be funny if I ever had kids, and I said, if it's a boy, I'll name one Domotro, and if it's a girl, I'll name it Domotro, just as a joke. And, you know, if I had a kid, I would give them their own identity. But then I was like, maybe Domotro and Domotro are parts of me. And it sort of turned out that they are. There are other parts that are the vowels that are the components of Dimitri. And Domotro is a sort of more meditative, giving, calm, gardening, cooking, reading, so on side of me. So you wouldn't see that side quite as much, because Domotro is a slightly happier, sillier, wants to be on camera, wants to talk and share facts side of me. And I've been letting Domotro be a lot of me currently. And so I was like, Domotro would be a good way to put my name on stuff, because I like the idea of having what they call a mononym, where you just have a single word that you can use as your name, and sort of like old philosophers and stuff have. And it's a sort of hard task, sort of grandiose goal to have a single name you can get away with finding you. But if you search Domotro, you do get me. And I'm not positive if this is going to be biased, because I have searched a few things here before. But if you search Domotro, even on other browsers, I think I come up, because there's not that many Domotros in the mix. And I'm trying to get that name stamped around. So to all the journalists out there, you know, sneak somewhere in your article, combo class, Domotro, and Threeven. And to note, since we're on the topic, if I search up Domotro here, what I get here is my personal Instagram, and then something that's a Reddit post. I haven't shared this Instagram before, but I might as well show you guys. To anyone who uses Instagram, I barely ever use this, but there's some pictures I put out for my friends over the years occasionally, a few little combo classy photos. So if anyone wants to see some rare little previews from my life, you could go on there, because I may start posting more on there at some point, although it's not that often now. And you get my wild streams. So that's pretty cool. We're going for our mononym. Now, if I publish my books at some point before long, I still have to figure out if I'm going to put my full name on the books or if I'm just going to be like, screw it, I'm just putting written by Domotro. I might just go with that. We'll see. Because there will be books coming out soon that I'll discuss later in the stream. Not coming out super soon, but it's a big quest over my life and over these grades of combo class to also include written works that I've been working on along with all our videos. We'll get into that later in the stream. For now, I'll answer the other question that was, where will my P.O. box be? So it's going to be a P.O. box in California that I will start, like I mentioned on some earlier streams. I thought it would be fun for anyone to look and see if they have any broken clocks. We will also accept dice, and I will think about if there's other things to add onto the acceptable list. If there's something that's a really neat mathematical game or toy that you're almost positive I'll like, you can do that as well. But I'll make a clearer list at some point. Maybe I'll post on the subreddit here, say something about, here's a list of things that are definitely allowed, and you can leave a comment on the subreddit or Discord asking me if there's anything else you want to send, and I'll probably say yeah. But you got to be chill with it because I might be opening them on streams, and I want it to be, nothing that is going to cause me chaos and have to stop doing that. I don't know how long-lived it's going to work, but I thought it'd be fun to try out. So if anyone has a broken clock, that will be started at some point in February. So at least by March, that will be started. And it will be somewhere in California, a P.O. box that you can mail your broken clocks to. Now, anything that you decide to send to the combo class, you do have to note it will probably get destroyed over the course of a year or two. Depending how cool it is, I might try and preserve it longer. However, it will probably be destroyed in the background or foreground of videos and be embedded into history in that way. So if you want something to become even more historic by showing up in my video, you can send it, but it will probably break at some point, quicker than it would break on your shelf, but it's going to get a more fun lifespan. Someone's wondering if there is a general formula for the Fibonacci sequence. Yes, there are many formulas we can use to try and calculate things in the Fibonacci sequence, and I haven't fully gone down the Fibonacci sequence rabbit hole on a long video yet. It's come up in several shorts, but there will be long videos about it at some point. It was one of the first math things that I got really deep into way back in middle school or early high school because I was into the golden ratio, and not only the Fibonacci sequence, but any sequence that follows a similar rule to the Fibonacci sequence where each term is composed of the sum of the last two will converge on a limit of the golden ratio. And the golden ratio also shows up in other places with the Fibonacci numbers. So they were one of the first things I got into, and I first went through a phase where I loved them. Then I went through a phase where I thought it was more so the general rule that was cool, where you add the last two to get the next, and that the seed that starts with 0, 1, or alternately starts with 1, 1, or equivalently starts with 1, 2, those all generate the same Fibonacci sequence. I like the 0, 1 beginning, but you'll also see 1, 1 as the beginning sometimes, and you could even have gone 1, 2 as your beginning. But with the Fibonacci sequence, I did then sort of fall back in love with that beginning and that particular string of numbers, as I realized other cool traits that some of which have come up in short videos on this channel, other of which are going to be in a long, awesome deep dive or two at some point where we look deeper into the Fibonacci sequence, and a similar one that a lot of people call the Lucas sequence, but technically is pronounced more like Luca, so like the Luca sequence. And so this is when you start it just to a slightly different seed. Instead of it being like 1, 2 sort of at the beginning, it's like 2, 1 sort of at the beginning. And these also have a lot of relationships with the golden ratio and with the Fibonacci sequence. So this is another really interesting start of it. But as we've seen on streams, we've played around before with taking any two numbers, composing a new sequence where each term is the sum of the last two, and then eventually dividing one by the one before, and it'll be really close to the golden ratio. So thank you all for joining here. Now we're going to look at some of these other cool articles here, which is going to be in preparation for the episode coming on the main channel tonight in just about 3 or 4 hours. So make sure you're ready for that main channel tonight. And that episode is about what's called pandigital numbers. And so we're going to get a little dive into seeing what Wikipedia, a few things they might have to say about pandigital numbers. Now, I scoured the internet for fun things about pandigital numbers, and our episode includes a mix of fun facts and some stuff that I haven't seen written down, that just my own ideas, my own things I stumbled into that are just strangely true things about numbers. So a lot of the stuff in the episode we won't be able to find online, because it's one of the episodes where I found myself going down my own little rabbit hole with the things. But they will give us a nice description and examples, which is that the pandigital numbers in a given base have each digit used at least once. And by significant digits, what they mean is that they're not counting the leading zeros, so you need the zero tucked somewhere in the middle, although you will encounter different types of definitions of them. And that's why right here what I'm going to show is another extra clear example of something I quickly do in the episode tonight, which is there are a few types of pandigital numbers that we're going to see cool things about. And what names should we give them? Unfortunately, like many things in math, it's not standardized, and there's a lot of different ones you'll see. You'll see some people use the term pandigital to mean ones that only use the digits exactly once with no repeats. You'll also sometimes see pandigital used for ones that don't involve the zero and involve 1 through the highest digit, like 9. So to be extra clear, I went with, we're calling as 2 big categories, pandigital numbers. We're going to assume, and if I ever say general or regular pandigital numbers, that's to clarify, I just mean this category. Pandigital numbers, we're going to assume means contains all the digits, including 0 in your base, and in any order, and they can have repeats. Then we're going to say that a zero-less pandigital number is when it has all the digits in your base, can have repeats, but it doesn't have any zeros in the mix. It has all the other digits and no zero in sight. Can't have a zero, in fact, otherwise we would call it that one instead, and doesn't get the title zero-less. Then the even more unclear definition that you'll see is how to refer to the ones that only use the digits once. There's a lot of terms I've seen floating around, one of which is restricted pandigital numbers, because they're sort of restricted to only use them once. But I actually use my own term in the episode. I think people should feel more comfortable using their own language and notation, because notation changes a lot and is sometimes ambiguous, as long as you get the point across to your audience. And so what I used to describe the ones that only use it exactly once with no repeats is, oops, this one didn't have a 6. It wasn't quite pandigital. Now it is. Okay. What I use to describe the ones that only do them exactly once each is minimal pandigital numbers. And that's because they're the minimal digit length a pandigital number could be in a given base would be to use them each once. So when I say a minimal pandigital number, it's basically shorthand for its definition, which is a pandigital number with the minimal amount of digits that in that base would still call it pandigital. Similarly, if I say a minimal zero-less, that would mean you're using these each once. All of the numbers from 1 through 9 with no zero exactly once. And in each case, it's the minimal amount of digits that that type could be to use them each only once. So basically, we have pandigital numbers, and as a subset, we have minimal pandigital. We also have zero-less, if those come up, and as a subset, we have minimal zero-less. So this is just to be extra clear, even though I go over a somewhat similar thing in the episode briefly, about how I'm going to be using terminology. A lot of it is just about pandigital in general. It means you can double the digits, you use your zeros, but there are fun facts and comparisons about these as well. In fact, there's some traits we're going to look at that some traits this has really similarly, or this type of number and that type of number. Other traits, they're almost like reverses. There are traits that this has, this type, that this has the opposite on some scale. So quite interesting there. We'll also remember a type of number that came up before that's going to come back. Of course it came back. The 3 even numbers always come back, and so do the hyper-11s, which is what I call a generalized rep unit, or even more generalized than some let them be, but in any sort of base, a number that would be composed of just the digit 1. And in the context of a specific base, some call that a rep unit, but it's also been called a monodigit and other things. So once again, I don't mind making up my own terminology once in a while. Who cares if it sticks or not? I just want to get the point across, and I think Hyper 11 is pretty easy to remember for those. That's what they look like. So your Hyper 11s, we made a whole episode about on the main channel earlier, and they're actually going to come back in a few contexts. And the most simple context they'll come back in is what happens when I take a certain one and square it. And if I take 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and I square it, I get this zero-less pandigital, not minimal, just a zero-less pandigital staircase. And that comes up briefly and seems random in the episode until we look at how when you go down to smaller bases, such as binary, there's a closer link and closer almost on or off switch sometimes for which numbers would be a hyper 11 or would be pandigital. So if anyone wants to think of anything interesting in advance, think about not this particular result, that's just a fun one, but think about what would it mean to be pandigital in binary. And that will be covered in the episode. There's additionally a scene that I cut from the episode. It would have been like 32 minutes if I had put this in. It's already a 29-minute episode. There's a scene I cut where I went into how this particular equation relates to things that other bases do. And then I realized that was the end of one day of filming, and before I got back to filming the next day, or a day or two later with my guy Carlo, who I do a bunch of filming with, I was like, oh wow, I was thinking about that subtopic, and it's a whole seed of an insane topic I'm going to need to put in grade -2. So I cut it from this episode, because it wasn't even that much about pandigital numbers, it was more about different bases. But that cut footage I will put on Patreon in a few days for my Patreon supporters, so they can get a little bonus that got snipped from the episode that will give a clue of kind of a fun topic that might show up in like 10 or 15 episodes later. So, hello to everyone. Thank you for joining me. That's a little idea of what it means to be a pandigital number. Now, like I said earlier, in the episode coming out tonight on the main channel, first, for like 10 minutes or so, it goes into, along with, there is some fire and chaos in the episode, so for fans of that, you know, you'll get your fire and chaos as well. But in the first 10 minutes or so, it's mostly about fun variations of these types of pandigital numbers, specific ones that have particular cool properties. And also how pandigital numbers, or these other types of them, could line up and overlap with other types of numbers. And the other types of numbers, funny enough, pretty much all turned out to be ones that started with P. There's, in the episode, pandigital primes, pandigital perfect powers, pandigital polydivisible numbers, pandigital persistent numbers. And don't worry if you don't know what all those mean, they're part of the episode is what those mean. But everything turned out to be P's. Pandigital palindromic numbers. And of course, we're talking about pandigital positive numbers. And there's P's everywhere in there. When you look up that in math, when I was thinking about it, it was all over. I'm like, oh, whoa, perfect numbers, pentagonal numbers. The things that weren't in the episode too, but that are fun types. So if you want any other interesting things to chew on before the episode comes out, you can think about, in addition to what would it mean to be pandigital in binary, or to be these other types of pandigital in binary, a minimal pandigital, a zeroless, or even a minimal zeroless. And then the other question you could ponder is, what would it take to be a pandigital prime number? And could we have a minimal pandigital prime number that only uses the digits once each? So if you also want to do any extra research or you're bored this afternoon, going back real quick to the Combo Class channel, some episodes that you might want to watch if you haven't seen or rewatch. In addition to, there is a lot of lore building here of recurring things I put in and recurring topics that build on each other, as well as things put in the episode to evolve. Going back to some of these, some that would be good for anyone with extra time today to rewatch before the pandigital episode coming out tonight would include possibly this palindromic numbers one, because this is just a kind of similar topic. It's not like the similar thesis to this episode. It doesn't go as deep as the new episode. It's mostly fun facts, but it has a lot of fun facts about palindromic numbers that read the same in both directions, which some of them are pandigital, and it's another interesting type of trait you could restrict numbers to that almost seems like a aesthetic or appearance-based trait, but that, if you look at what it would mean in different bases, can give you a lot of clues of what it takes to write numbers or what patterns would automatically emerge if you use a positional base system. So this one's fun, and that's sort of the first episode where I start going into different bases on here. And this Hyper 11s one is very linked to a few minutes of this episode, where it goes into how the largest primes we've ever discovered are Hyper 11s in binary, and why that's the case. Another one that could relate to this, mildly one that relates to a fun fact, is the 3-even one, but that's pretty mild. One that does relate to another part is the factorial episode. I do a little reminder on the screen of what you'd need to know from the factorial episode, but there is a bit in the factorial episode where we briefly are looking at minimal zeroless pandigital numbers, and that is sort of the seed of a concept that we see in this episode as well. So thank you all for listening to all of this stuff and joining me here. I think you'll like the episode coming tonight. And one other thing that I wanted to look at as far as what's going to be in the episode is I'm going to call the episode the Pandigital Paradox. Because although a lot of the early stuff in the episode is just fun stuff about pandigital numbers, then it goes into the fundamental importance of pandigital numbers, and it goes into also some traits that I think related to infinity, because there is an infinite amount of pandigital numbers. Human brains aren't always built to handle infinity, and some of the oldest paradoxes are based around humans' inability to handle infinity, and how you can come to conclusions, or that either come to a conclusion that's not true, although it feels right, or have something you know is factually true that feels off. And these are things we could classify as paradoxes. If we look up what they call a paradox, its definition is a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true, or a statement or proposition that, despite sound or apparently sound reasoning from acceptable premises, leads to a conclusion that seems senseless, logical, unacceptable, or self-contradictory, or a situation, person, or thing that combines contradictory features or qualities. So I really like paradoxes. I have a few books here somewhere that are purely about paradoxes, and one of my favorite authors when I was first getting into math, who's still one of my favorites, Raymond Smullyan, who wrote a bunch of great books about logic and different fields of math as well. This old jolly guy So this guy wrote some real great books, and a bunch of his books are sort of like stories or analogies that will take place on some island with some strange rule or something like that. But in disguise, they're types of propositional logic or combinatorics or other types of math. And some of the stuff he goes into are fun paradoxes. And that got me hooked on some of those ideas, so I bought whole books of paradoxes. And I want to make a bunch of episodes about paradoxes, and funny enough, the only episode that I filmed a whole episode for grade -1 and scrapped, there's been a few bonus videos I did that with, but the only one for the main channel that I didn't put out but I filmed a whole episode for, maybe someday I'll put it on the Patreon if I go through the footage, but it was an episode about the liar paradox and how it leads to other paradoxes like what's called Russell's paradoxes and even to Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and I didn't feel like I'd gotten it fully right. Paradoxes are such a sort of surreal vibe that I felt like the episode was too like normal and real for me to have this mood of mystery that paradoxes have the potential of bringing. So I actually scrapped that, and I'll come back to that in grade -2, the episode about liar paradoxes and other sorts of self-referential statement-based paradoxes, and how it relates to how certain whole things about numbers cannot be fully built properly or in ways you'd want them to be optimized. Certain things are impossible. So that will come back. For now, let's look at a few examples of what Wikipedia says are a list of some paradoxes. To anybody who wants to do some reading on your own later, some of this stuff I will explain, in my opinion, better than how they're going to explain it, but they still give you the seed of the idea of all of these. And boy, are articles like this full of knowledge. This is just rabbit holes upon rabbit holes of knowledge you could get, and just interesting, perplexing things. There's all sorts of different types of paradox. You might think that something like the liar paradox, the one I've been referring to, which is something along the lines of this statement is false, which if you're trying to make a system of logic where simple statements like that can be labeled true or false, well, this can't be labeled either, because if it's true, it's false, which means it's true, and then it's false, and so on. And either the true or false you try and label this with causes a contradictory loop. And so this statement not only feels sort of paradoxical, because it feels simple enough and objective enough that you should be able to say that's true or that's wrong, but you can't. It also exposes limits of what we could do with language. Maybe it's hard to make a system with a binary type of logic, or impossible to have a fully functional binary logic system if things are going to reference themselves. But even without self-reference, you can get whole fields of paradoxes. Some of the ones I'm most... Oh, whoa! They have a... That's funny. I don't know if this word was like making me extra think of that, but I think I was... Just the liar paradox makes me think of self-reference is the idea behind that. They have a whole section on it here. And then they got a section of vagueness. So, let me run you through my discussion of a few of these paradoxes. I'll just see a few of them that catch my eye as easy, quick ones to explain. So, if we're looking at the barber shop paradox, which... No, I'm thinking of the barber paradox. It's funny, they have these at barbershop versus barber. I don't know which one they're going with there. But let's say that you have a town and you have a barber who shaves everybody who don't shave themselves. Well, so you have the groups of people who shave themselves, and then you got the barber there, and you got the people who don't shave themselves getting shaved by him. But what about the barber? Does he shave himself, or does she shave herself, or whatever? The barber can't either way. If they shave themselves, they shouldn't have. And if they don't, they should have. So that's a rule that's impossible. And then you could think of how that relates to computers or languages or things like that. You can't have certain types of self-referential things follow certain rules, because they'll glitch when they come to themselves. If you go down here, this one's pretty fun. Paradox of the court. So sometimes I've seen it as an analogy of some old philosophers where they'll name them like this is Plato and Socrates or whatever. But in any case, you got a student and a teacher, and they have a deal. The teacher's like, I'm going to teach you how to do everything a lawyer needs to do. I will train you. You'll be my mentor. I'll do it for free. But then when you win your first case, I get all the money from that. And then we move on from there. You can do all the rest of your cases on your own. And the guy's like, okay, cool. I'm down with that program. Gets mentored for years, gets really good at the law. And then after that decides, maybe I don't want to be a lawyer. So he never pursues a case. Now the guy who mentored him, the teacher, is mad. He's like, what? You didn't even try to become a lawyer. I was supposed to get paid because this had an implicit assumption that you were going to try and be a lawyer. So the teacher sues the student. Now, since they both know law, they're both representing themselves in court in this case. Now, the judge becomes a little perplexed. He's like, so if the teacher wins, then he's saying that he should get the money from the first case. But if the teacher wins, this will be the student having tried and lost a case. Whereas if the student wins and he's awarded that, he gets the money, which should go to the teacher, which means the teacher won. And there are different ways of explaining it. I'll do it more perfect when we cover this in another episode, but it's a certain sort of funny deal that leads you to another impossible loop. Now, a lot of the episode I scrapped was about this liar paradox, varieties, things like this. Some of them are just copies of it, like if Pinocchio said, my nose grows now. That's just a weird variation, not even a perfect one, of the liar paradox. But other ones are a little different. The next statement is true. The previous statement is false. Now, going forward from here, you get ones like vagueness. The ship of Theseus is, let's say that I really like this marker. I have such a soft fundamental spot for this marker. So when it starts dying, I replace the cap with a new cap, a fresh one. Then the ink starts going out, so I replace the ink with some new ink. Then the outside starts going, so I replace it with a new outside. Well, at what point, if any, is it a new pen? So the vagueness here is that you can't really have a concrete idea of when something changes if it's the same thing or not. And an example is the ship, that if you had a wooden ship, you could deconstruct it and rebuild it for broken parts getting fixed over the years. Eventually the ship is completely new pieces, but at every given time, it was 99% the pieces it had before and 1% maybe being changed. So you have a sort of strange evolution you can't define the cutoff on. And the other one they mention here, the paradox of the heap, is similar. Like if I say like that many grains of sand times like 500, then if that many grains of sand we call like a heap or a large amount. And then you might think you could say for any large heap of sand, removing one grain won't change its status from large heap to small heap or from being a non-heap. But you could keep removing grains of sand, and one of them has to make it change, because eventually things are going to be gone. Then we've covered the interesting number paradox, which we'll go into more in the future, because that stream had weird stuff with the internet. Now, the Simpsons paradox and things like these are statistical paradoxes, where if you look at sets of data, you can have one thing win the majority of individual things, but another thing win when you amalgamate all the data. Then you get some really trippy ones. The Bertrand's box paradox is cool, but there's this really crazy one that's a different Bertrand's one. There's a few he made. There's this one about the chord paradox on a circle, and then there's another one that's just about like super insane, relates to free will and stuff. Now, there's a lot more fun ones here that we will certainly cover. One of the ones I wanted to stop by here is a variation on Zeno's paradoxes, which are related to humans' inability to grasp infinities. Now, one of the first ones is a little simplistic, but it still holds its role as being a historical paradox that Zeno raised, which is if you have an arrow moving like you shoot an arrow through a bow, and it's going along a line, well, at any given moment, is it moving? If you say at a still moment, it shouldn't be moving. But if at every moment it's not moving, how'd it get there? So our relationship between space and time already makes us sort of unable to process actual things moving, because they're composed of an infinite amount of infinitely thin snapshots, essentially. And then you get to variations on that. Like one that I like is, let's say there's a race between the tortoise and the hare, and they're trying to get over here. And let's say the hare goes twice as fast as the tortoise, so he's like, or about twice as fast. Let's say he's gonna go twice as fast, but they don't know exactly how fast it's gonna be. And so he says, all right, hare, you're gonna get a head start. You get to start all the way out there. Then, oh no, wait, I'm mixing up the names. Okay, wait. The hare, oh, and by the way, you should watch the old Looney Tunes about the tortoise and the hare races with Bugs Bunny that came out in the 1940s. That there's a trilogy of them made by some of the different Looney Tunes directors. Really great. I'm a huge fan of certain old, like, 1940s animation. So, the Bugs Bunny versus the tortoise, classic. Now, let's say that, we'll describe it like that. So this is the 4th episode in that series now. You got Bugs Bunny versus the tortoise. Bugs Bunny's going to say, I go like twice as fast as you. I'm going to let you get a head start. So he lets it start there. And now, since it's going like twice as fast, by the time the hare, Bugs Bunny, gets to the spot where the tortoise started, the tortoise is like halfway more from there. Then by the time he gets to the spot where that was, it's a little further. And whenever the hare gets to the spot the tortoise was last, the tortoise is a little further. So it seems like the hare will never pass the tortoise, because at any point, if you're talking about those increments, where they were at time A, then when it gets there, we call it time B, and then when it gets there, we call it time C. At every point of those, the tortoise is a bit ahead. But the hare does pass the tortoise because it goes twice as fast, and that didn't start halfway. So our brains are kind of bad at comprehending infinities. And a lot of these geometric ones, of course, we'll get into that as well. But what about infinities of numbers? So this is why I call the episode coming out the pandigital paradox, is that when we start looking at traits that pandigital numbers have on bigger stretches of number line when you approach bigger and bigger stretches and look at traits that happen with bigger and bigger stretches, you sort of learn facts about infinity, because you learn facts about what this infinite set of natural numbers behaves like if a trait approaches a thing and stays there as the sets get bigger, or approaches it closer and closer. And so one way that we can try and make concepts like this less paradoxical briefly, but this feels paradoxical in its own right, is to say, all right, there's an infinite amount of some type of number, and there's an infinite amount of things that don't have some trait. And let's say, for example, I want to compare the square numbers to the total amount of whole numbers. Now, there are 2 or more directions I could take this. There's many directions. One direction some people might expect me to take this is that we can name types of infinity. We can say that both of those, the whole numbers and square numbers, actually are the same type of infinity, although the set of real numbers, which includes things like square root of 2 and 1/2 and a lot of stuff, is a different type of infinity that's larger. And this is related to things that you can prove by trying to put things in one-to-one correlations as you go toward infinity. And so, on that sense, they're both the same. They both have this one type of infinity of them, the square numbers and the total whole numbers. But that seems like a dead end to the answer if we were trying to see how many squares are there compared to whole numbers? So you might think, well, even though they're both the same type of infinity, can we say anything about the proportion or ratio between them? Now, once again, we can't describe infinity versus infinity. We have to go up bigger and bigger stretches of analyzing things and see if we approach anything where it looks like it's going to approach or stay no matter how big our finite thing gets. Then we'll sort of learn these facts about infinity secretly. And one of the ways, like a comment mentions, is you can add an infinite amount of fractions that converges to a finite number, which is true. And a lot of people, when I made some episodes about the harmonic series, left comments where they think they're so smart and they're like, how is this interesting and weird? Of course, an infinite amount of things will add up to something infinite. And that's not true, because the harmonic series and some other ones are special and other ones are different, special in their own different way, because not all infinite series go infinite. Some of them converge. And that is a topic that will be in grade -1. In one of the last episodes of the grade -1 is about infinite series of reciprocals of numbers. And I had to wait to do that episode until I did the pandigital number, because all these strange paradoxical traits of pandigital numbers' relationships to infinities were crucial for me to set up before I do my reciprocals episode, which is about these infinite series. Now, one way that we could try and compare these infinities is to say, as I go up different chunks of number line, what percent of numbers have had a trait, like my squareness or whatever trait I'm asking about, and does that approach anything? So let's think about it for squares. Let's think about this trait, which is known as natural density. The natural density is for a type of natural number, and in this case meaning ones that are positive integers. As you look at bigger and bigger stretches of positive integers, is there a percentage that the amount of them approaches? What is it? Well, sometimes it's a random seeming fraction. Like when we had these things called abundant numbers and deficient numbers in an earlier episode, which were numbers that all of their factors apart from themselves add up to either less or more than themselves. Like if all their factors apart from themselves add up to less than them, they're deficient. Add up to more than them, they're abundant. Add up to equal to them, they're perfect. And those fun number names have come up, and they actually have, not for perfect numbers, which are too rare, but like the abundant numbers have a particular percentage that is approached as you go up the number line and scan more and more numbers. If we look at something simpler before the squares, like we ask about how many numbers are even, well, if I scan the first number, 0 out of 1 are even, 0%. If I scan the first two numbers, exactly 1/2 are even. Scan the first three numbers, now 1/3, and then we're going to get, scanning more numbers, if I'm just going one at a time, just to show them, we're going to get another 1/2, and then we're going to alternate between getting exactly 1/2 of them have been even if we ever scan an even amount, and getting closer and closer to exactly 1/2 if we ever scanned an odd amount. Like if we scan the first 1,000,001 numbers, well, a little less than half of them would be even, but really close to half. And as we scan more and more numbers, it approaches to being like half alternating with approaching itself. So we can say that it does approach as a series, all the terms being 1/2. Natural density is 0.5. You could think of it as 50% of the numbers are even, but technically we'll use a range from 0 to 1. So what if I ask about the squares? Well, how many squares are in the first 10 numbers? We got 1, 4, and 9. We happen to have 3/10. It's a little random of a spot to cut off because it wasn't a square number itself. With 100, if we look at the first 100 numbers, that's easier to know we have 10 squares because it's going up to from 1 squared to 10 squared, which is that. So if we have 10 squares out of 100, that's 1/10 of them are square numbers. If I scan the first 10,000 numbers, well, that's 100 squared. So there's going to be 100 square numbers in that mix. 100 over 10,000 is 1/100th of them were square. If I scan the first million numbers, well, that's 1,000 squared. So 1,000 would be square, and 1,000 over a million is 1/1000th of them. In fact, if we continue this pattern, if we say we're scanning the first n squared numbers for some n, well, we'll note that it's going to go up to the nth square, so there's going to be n squares total. So we're going to have n squares divided by a total of n squared numbers, which goes to 1 over n, meaning that as n gets larger, this shrinks and shrinks. If I scan the first 1 trillion squared numbers, then there's going to be 1/1 trillionth of them are squares. This shrinks and shrinks towards 0. Its limit as that goes up is this, as that goes to infinity, this goes to 0. So, although it never hits 0 because there are square numbers in the mix, it approaches 0, and so its natural density is defined as 0. The squares, in a strange sense, are 0% of the natural numbers if we see what the ratio or proportion approaches. So that's just a little bit about what we can call natural density. If we look at Wikipedia, they will also have some examples, such as the prime numbers. The prime numbers, although they do continue to happen, they do get rarer and rarer. And so we see that for the set P of all primes, based on this thing I haven't covered yet called the prime number theorem, that the density of the primes is 0. Here they also note the examples I gave. Set of even numbers is 0.5, set of squares is 0. Here's the one I mentioned too. Abundant numbers is somewhere in that range, the natural density. And they have some other ones. So that's an interesting way to try and compare infinities. And it leads you to sort of what I would call, hold on, I got to plug in my computer. It leads to what I would call paradoxical conclusions, where, for example, if I look at the type of numbers that we're used to using, squares seem medium rare. They seem like mildly popular, like the type of numbers we typically use, like let's say up to 4-digit numbers. Those are going to have up to 4 digits, would have 99 squares. So we think of them as having maybe somewhere around this like 1/10 or 1/100th of numbers or squares, because that's the range of numbers we usually use. So it's sort of perplexing to put that at odds with like, there's in a way 0% of them. Weird. Same with the primes. So keep that in mind, because that's related to some of the paradoxical things that those families of pandigital numbers do. So comments are also mentioning some other fun paradoxes, such as the Monty Hall paradox, which will be mentioned, and some other similar ones other ones like that. So those are always interesting. For anyone who likes paradoxes, one good author on those is this recreational mathematician, Martin Gardner, who was actually a friend of that guy, Raymond Smullyan, I mentioned. And he does all sorts of interesting puzzles and recreational math that he popularized and helped make his own discoveries on, sort of like my videos in a written form to a degree. And they're really great articles. So get any collection from this guy, Martin Gardner. It's not only paradoxes, but if you like stuff like weird paradoxes and puzzles, you'll like it. The guy Raymond Smullyan is also super great. And paradoxes should be more popular. So remember, paradoxes are part of why life is fun and surprising, because when we try and describe things, we get these strange, conflicting enigmas, and you gotta roll with it. And if you roll with it the right way, you can find it exciting. So paradoxes make me get a mystical, intrigued vibe. So those were some things on these articles I wanted to pull up. Let me take a peek at what I put in the description that some of my other plans were. So the other plans I mentioned in here were to discuss some of the books I'm writing and to look at some of the new comically bad answers that chat robot that is continuing to be quite popular, Chat GPT, has given me. So I was thinking of editing together a short of some of the craziest ones it's given me, including some of the ones on previous streams. And so for fun, last night I asked it some more stuff, and as well today I did. I forget which ones were last night or today, but I asked it some more math questions, and everyone rants about how good this thing is, this program. Everyone claims they're getting it to do their homework and stuff. Well, I've seen it be really smart at certain things, but I pray that you're not using this thing to do your math homework, because you are going to fail that class. This thing is terrible at math and very confident about its out of left field wrong answers. So let's look at a few of those, and having this up, we can also search new ones. So leave a question if you want to add something. But I like to ask it what's something interesting about certain numbers or concepts, not because I expect to learn something interesting about those. I'll go to other sites for that. But because I want to see what percent of them they get wrong in what way. So first off the bat, they're off to a pretty bad start on this first one I asked, which was related to our pandigital numbers. This is a zero-less minimal one. I asked them what's something interesting mathematical about it. They say it's curious because it's a composite number, yet it's a rep unit. A rep unit's what I call a hyper 11. They're saying this thing's a hyper 11. And the number consisting of only the digit 1 repeated. So they're off to a strange, confused start there. I like to ask it things that may confuse it. So I asked it what's a prime number that contains each digit exactly once, and they note some things that will come up in the episode. So we'll skip by that, but you can always flash back there if you want a sneak preview. But that stuff will somewhat come up in the episode because they got that one mildly right. Now I asked them, oh no wait, they didn't get that one mildly right. Let me see. There's no prime number that contains each digit exactly once. A prime number is a positive integer greater than 1 that's only divisible by 1 and itself. The smallest prime number is 2. To have each digit exactly once, the number would have to have at least 10 digits, making it composite by definition. So yeah, no, I forgot. They're really wrong on that. I then asked them, why are all numbers with 10 digits composite, like they're claiming? They say all numbers with at least 10 digits are composite because of the fundamental theorem of arithmetic. So since the number 10 has 2 digits, the smallest number with 10 digits is that. It's like, okay. This means that every number with n greater than or equal to 10 will be composite when they're talking about n digits. So I tried to ask them then, what's the largest amount of digits a prime can have? And they got that right, basically, that you can't say a largest amount. But that seems to be the implication that there would be a largest amount from this everything's composite after that point idea. So I asked them about pandigital numbers, and they didn't tell me too much, but some of that stuff, they got 1 or 2 things right that'll be in the episode. I asked them about pi, and one of the interesting things about that was they said that oh no, they didn't say anything interesting here. I was asking them a few more things. And a little later they go to something related to that. But here they say, I asked them, please use the fundamental theorem of arithmetic to prove there's an infinite amount of primes. Which you can do. And they basically go through it. They do it a bit wrong. This isn't how you'd want to write it. your teacher wouldn't like it written this way. But they kind of get it right. So then I say, please use a similar proof that there are infinite primes that are on odd numbers. Oh no, I messed that up. I meant infinite primes on odd numbers that are 2 apart from each other. That's the twin prime conjecture, and it's unsolved. And they say, we can use a similar proof as the one used to show that there are an infinite number of prime numbers to show that there's an infinite number of odd primes that are 2 apart from each other, which would be proving a huge thing to math. And they try and just use the same proof as before, but substituting in a bunch of +2s. So then I ask them, did you just prove the twin prime conjecture? And they're like, nope, I didn't. That says there are an infinite amount of twin primes, prime numbers that differ by 2. The proof I gave shows an infinite number of odd primes that are 2 apart. It's like, what? Those are the same thing. So I tried to get them to correct it, but they couldn't go with it. So asked them a few questions, and some of these they were getting right. Asking them some random stuff. They don't like to do too much, but here was one more interesting one where when I ask them about some random things, they say small numbers like 0 or 1 to large numbers like pi or e. So I'm like, explain more about how pi is a large number. Because I mean, like, most people would not consider pi that large. It's like barely more than 3. When you think of a large number, you're probably thinking of many digits. So they say that since the decimal representation is infinite, it's a large number. So I'm like, is the square root of 2 also a large number? And then they're like, yeah, it's considered a large number in the sense that this, or it's not as large as some stuff like pi. And I say, what is something interesting about numbers that are both primes and perfect squares? Sometimes I ask them something like that that's completely off. That you can't have a number that's a prime and a perfect square. That's just very simply against the definitions. A square needs to have something multiplied by itself. A prime can't have that. So I ask them, what's something interesting about that type of number? And this one, it did trick them. Numbers that are both prime and perfect squares are considered rare and interesting. And they use the word rare a lot in this answer. Rare. Rare. They use rare 3 times in there. But in the way implying that they exist. So here they go. Numbers that are both prime and perfect squares are therefore somewhat rare and difficult to find. An example of such a number is the prime number 5, which is also a perfect square because the square root of 5 is 2.236. So that was pretty funny. Now, I'm going to ask it 1 or 2 more things while we have it open, if it goes, and feel free to leave a comment if you have any particular requests. So, let's ask it, since this got cut off right here, what? Oh, no. Okay, it worked. Okay, that's funny. The only prime number that is also a perfect square is 5, they say. All other prime numbers are not perfect squares, and all perfect squares are not prime numbers. There are no other numbers that are both prime and perfect squares. That's really special about 5. That's interesting that they think 5 can do that. It's a quite interesting power they think 5 has. Now, let's ask them, and I'll put this here, I guess, so you can read it a little better, maybe. Let's ask them more about that. Are there any other numbers that are some sort of perfect power and also a prime? Now, a perfect power, which will come up in our episode tonight, are numbers that are a to the power of b, with b 2 or greater. Sometimes a is defined as having to be 2 or greater, or sometimes 1 or greater is allowed. No, there are none. So they're right here. But they're wrong about the 5 thing. What else is special mathematically about the number 5? It's prime number, you're right. Oh, no, whoa, no, you're not right. It's not the first prime number greater than 2. And wait, it's a building block for many other prime numbers. No, the whole point of prime numbers, they're each their own building block for the composite numbers together. It's a Fibonacci number, you got that. It is a regular polygon. That any whole number I could have said is that. It appears in the formula for the Pythagorean theorem. They're thinking the Pythagorean theorem is always about the 3, 4, 5 triangle. Nope, 5 isn't in the formula. It's just an example of it. The sum of 2 square numbers. Okay, that's true. That does make it a square pyramidal number. Those are pretty awesome. Okay, so tell me more about the formula for the Pythagorean theorem and what it means about every right triangle. Here they're getting it right. See, sometimes they give you an answer that would be totally fine to use if you were cheating on your homework. But, like, it's 50-50. That's a pretty bad rate that, like, half of their answers are just complete errors. So, I don't know about this whole using this thing to cheat. Maybe that works in other subjects, but how are you going to cheat with these answers? So, in any case, I'll probably edit some of the craziest ones I've gotten into a short, because I remember this journey of asking it weird math stuff started when I was just like, let me just for fun try this out and ask it, what do you know about a random number? So I was like, what do you know about the number 1? And they're like, one interesting fact about the number 1 is that it's the only number with the property that the sum of the reciprocals of all the positive integers is equal to 1. Complete nonsense, out of left field, random, wrong. And then they start doing all these little formulas. And then at the end they say, therefore the sum of the reciprocals of all the positive integers except 1 is 1/2. Which means that the sum of the reciprocals of all the positive integers is 1 plus 1/2 equals 1. They had started to write that it was 1. They changed their mind halfway that it's 1.5, but at the end they're like, oh man, it was supposed to be 1, we said. All right, stick an equal sign in there. So, yeah, use extreme caution if using this to cheat in any science type mathematical related field. Or possibly in general. I haven't tested how good it is at reliability on other stuff. Like, it's really smart that it can do this stuff. Super cool for people developing this. But I'm not, like, dissing the people developing it. It's super awesome they can make this. But I'm surprised there's so many headlines of people using it to cheat. It's like, are people just now writing on their papers that, like, all this stuff, 1 plus 1 equals 1 times 1? Stuff like that. Are people going with, this was the one where they get really into, oh no, that isn't it. There's one where they get really into every number you ask about being some sort of multiplicative identity for every number. Sometimes it's not even like a little trait about the number when you ask it about it. It's just something crazy about the whole number line. They'll be like, 7 is the only 2-digit prime, or something. You're like, whoa. So that's funny. We're probably going to move on from there, but that's pretty wild that all of these ones are that often off. So we can say that if you cataloged on each of the whole numbers all these answers, the natural density of the numbers that were correct would be about 0.4 or 0.3. Natural density of the numbers of the answers that were wrong, 0.6 or 0.7. And actually, if you add up the amount of errors, since some of the answers contain multiple errors, I would say there's on average more than 1 error per answer. It's a really bad rate to have. Nothing against the programmers. Super awesome they can make this. But as far as using this as a cheating device, you don't want your thing to be right less than half the time. Okay, we're going to move on from the Chat GPT for a minute. One of the other topics I said that I was going to mention today, the other thing that is remaining in this description, which will be filled with chapters and timestamps in like an hour. I'll fill those in after the stream. So to anyone who wants to rewatch or who's watching in the future, any bits you haven't seen, you'll have some little chapters to skip around the bits you think you'll be interested in. Mostly stay tuned for that full episode coming out in a few hours from now on the main channel. But what we're going to look at for one of our possibly latest events of the stream, although feel free to leave questions in the chat, we're going to look at briefly some thoughts about some of the books that I've been writing. Now, one of my main goals over these next couple years, and with my life in general, is to create a lot of the art and teaching, and sometimes mixes of those, that I want to show the world. And you guys mostly know my video projects, pretty much only know my video projects, but I also do a lot of writing projects and a lot of musical projects. And I will even be releasing Domotro albums at some point, but that's a story for another stream. About the books, before I ever was that deep into filmmaking, I loved making homemade movies with friends and trying my own YouTube channels since practically when YouTube started when I was a kid. But so I've always been into filmmaking too. But I've always been almost even more so into writing. These days I spend a lot more time on filmmaking. But when I think about what I want to give the world, some of the deepest things are written texts. And these range from math teaching books that are my own new version of what a textbook could be. And they range to memoirs about my life. And they range to fiction stories. And I've come up with this town in my head that I've created all these stories in over the years. And all these recurring characters and locations. And there are at least 4 or 5 books that I have half written. And I have more than a book worth of notes that just need to be extremely refined. I'm bad at the finishing stage on those because I'm really perfectionist on them. Somehow I'm less perfectionist on my videos than with my books. I don't know why. So hopefully over the next couple years, one of my goals is to, and this may even be over the next couple months, transition out of private teaching. I still work a few days of the week teaching private students to make money. Well, I might stop that and just try and dedicate a lot more time, which is riskier, to my writing and my video making, which will make me have an even clearer streaming schedule, clearer video schedule, and a better chance of getting out my books in the near future, which I'll leave some rough drafts of on the Patreon or maybe the Discord, and then at some point I will maybe need to sell the books, but maybe I'll give them away free for like an optional donation, because my main goal is to eventually, if I had enough money, give away my books for free. I just want them read. We'll see to what degree I need to hustle for money when I'm putting out the book, but my end goal is for people to read them, not to pay me, you know. Money is boring. So with the books, I do want to, in the next year or two, as I switch out of private teaching a little bit, dedicate a lot more of my time throughout the week to not only my filming stuff, but to finishing a couple of my books to start. And one of them is going to be a choose-your-own-adventure-like fiction book that does contain a lot of mathematical concepts, but it is just a fiction book. You could see it as a mystery, comedy, surrealist something that happens to contain a lot of math. And it relates to layers and iterations of myself that are fictional. And it's in a choose-your-own-adventure-like form. But it's not where you pick the next thing to happen. You don't change the plot. It's just a bunch of interlocked, embedded, intertwined documents that you choose which one you want to read next. You choose where to go through a maze. And it's a circular maze, so there's no end. You'll have to wander around the maze a little bit before you've met every corner in the maze, but it is circular, so you'll never dead end. You'll be able to see every corner, and you'll get to pick your own path if you're, want to have fun with it, you can go on whatever direction of this maze that you think will tell you the most interesting order of the story, or just where you happen to land. And some of it might not make sense till you wander around the maze a few times and see everything from some different angles. So that's a big project I've been working on since a few years ago. And this book started when I was an alcoholic and wondering if my life would ever get on track to where it is right now. And my body was in a lot of pain because I didn't get the surgeries I currently have yet, and I hadn't been diagnosed with the reason I needed the surgeries. And so I was in a lot of pain. I was heavily drinking. I was really depressed and anxious. And I wasn't working on the film stuff successfully. I have some earlier iterations of when I had the lab coat before I got the whiteboard, where I tried to film combo class like videos, and they were just too chaotic. I also have old channels that semi-worked, not in terms of gaining a big audience, but like I made some fun projects on. And I have linked some of my videos on the Patreon, which I'll show the rest of you at some point. But my private Instagram I linked earlier in this video is enough personal stuff for today, which you can add if you want. And the era back then, when I was super chaotic and sloppy and wondering if my life would ever get back on track, was when I started cooking up this strange iterations of myself. And I stumbled into an interesting paradox that's sort of near the heart of the book. That's sort of a paradox I invented or stumbled into or something that we might live in. And this book will take a lot of decoding, but I think it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be a new way to make a book. I don't think there's ever been a book like that. Now, as for another book that's a little more centric to what the combo class themes usually are, I also will be continuing to collect my notes about Threven and Throd numbers, not only to make a Wikipedia page in a month or two about multiples of 3, also known as Threven numbers, and see if I can get that in, which all these things, remember, you guys shouldn't do first, because I'm going to back them up with a lot of facts when I do them to get them stuck on Wikipedia, and then make a petition at some point, more videos and stuff. Along the way, I'm also going to take my book-sized amount of notes about Threven numbers, as well as even numbers and Threven evens, and write a book. And that one, I'm not sure its structure yet. If it'll be in order, choose your own adventure, like how it'll work. I do want to make choose your own adventure math textbooks where you get to pick your order. Sort of like Wikipedia feels, where you can hop around to different topics, but if it was self-enclosed, and then you led to all of them relating to some topic, but you can hop around almost like hyperlinks. But I'm not sure if the Threven book will do that or be more in order. I need to refine my notes into more written text, but there's a lot to say about Threven numbers and even numbers and all that. So those will be coming out. And then hopefully over the course of the next 5 or 10 years, I will be publishing a lot of cool books along with my videos, because I have a lot of ideas with brainstorms that are book length that I need to polish down a bit. And I have too many ideas for books, so maybe I'll even co-write some books someday, where I'm the ideas guy and someone else helps put together the other parts of them. We'll see. Hopefully I can also get over my perfectionism of those, because I haven't published any books or, put them out for free, which I would be fine with for some of my projects, because I'm too perfectionist about them. So I'll try and work on that. In any case, hopefully I'll be able to dedicate more time to all the combo stuff, books and videos that I do, and my music in a month or two, as I maybe transition out of private teaching and take the more riskier chance on hoping that even I'll still live with my family for a bit probably, and hoping that the small amount of money from Patreon and ads will be enough to keep hiring camera people and editors and stuff. So far so good, because like we mentioned earlier, this is the 300th day since I posted any combo class related stuff online. I move so fast that some people already are like, oh, remember this era of it? But it's all been within the past year. Although the first few episodes on the main channel I had filmed 1 year ago, but that was all. So thank you all for joining me. Let me check the comments. Those are all of our main topics for today. but I am almost done editing that pandigital episode, so I just gotta mix the audio a little bit on that, which I'm not the best at, so I just gotta make sure the audio levels are a little closer to lined up, and maybe trim certain things, add a few more title cards, stuff like that. So gotta whip that together, and that should be out around 6 o'clock my time. It's about to be 3:50 my time. And let me see if there's any comments that have any questions I would like to reply to. And yeah, to whoever's referring to different amounts of senses, there are often referred to as 5 senses, but that's an episode I want to make someday, which is how many senses really are there? It's a very arbitrary scale, and we could define it a little differently, where other things that humans do have could be defined as senses. So what are the other senses? That will be an episode someday. Someone asked, are there any YouTubers I would want to collab with? There are, yeah, I love YouTube. So let me see. I'm a huge YouTube fan since I was a kid, and my friend showed me, hey, look at this random video of someone like falling off a ledge and hurting themselves or something. It's funny. And I was like, how are we able to see that? And it's like, oh, there's this newish thing called YouTube that you're able to just like upload your own videos to. And I was like, that's so cool. And I've had tons of crazy YouTube channels over the years. This is just the first one that blew up in any way. I love posting on it and I love watching it. I don't watch much other stuff. I have a few TV shows that I like. I have some cartoons I like. But I rarely watch movies or shows. I watch a lot of YouTube though. And so, let me just make myself big for the outro. We don't need to be seeing that stuff. So, YouTubers I'd like to collaborate with. First, let's go down the mathy ones, because those are the obvious things to discuss. The people who I would make a really good fit because their videos are somewhat of a similar lane to mine already. And those people would include 3 Blue 1 Brown, or Grant Sanderson, who's the mastermind behind that. Would include Matt Parker from Stand Up Maths. Would include Burkhard Polster from Mathologer. Would include Being on Numberphile. I want to do a presentation on there. And I would love to collaborate with the main Vsauce guy, Michael Stevens. So those are some of the top tier, like, mathy, sciencey ones. There are a bunch of others I like. Tons I could name. But those are some of the ones who I would really like to collaborate with. There's also some people who aren't really YouTubers who are just like mathematicians or stuff I'd love to collaborate with. But let me stick on the YouTuber realm for now. I just would like to collaborate in more random ways. So, like, it would be fun to go on random types of podcasts or interview shows or things like that. It would be fun to collaborate with some commentary channels. Like, I would love to do a dumb video on some commentary channel where I wouldn't have to worry about making it fair use to avoid copyright claims or stuff like that. Their editor or them would worry about that. And I could just, like, have fun laughing about some particular thing in culture or the internet or whatever. So that would be cool, just to like work with some random commentary YouTubers. Some of the good ones in that realm are like Danny Gonzalez, Drew Gooden, Curtis Connor, Eddie Burback. Those are some good like random commentary channels. I'm sure I'm missing some. There are a lot of people I love. One of my icons who I would love to collaborate with is Steve-O, who does make YouTube videos. And I just know him originally from being the Craziest Jackass member, and from also being someone who overcame a crazy amount of addictions and still is an insane stuntman, maybe the craziest stuntman in the world, possibly. And now has been sober for a long time on like a lot of substances that he was crazy addicted to. So there's a lot of inspiring things about his story. So I'd love to work with him. I have a lot of ways which I relate to his desire for insanity and his certain things he's had to overcover. Someone says black pen, red pen. That would be fun. I haven't watched as much of his stuff. He just has like tons of videos of him doing stuff on the whiteboard I've seen. So I've seen little bits of some. That would be fun. Vsauce 2, same. That would be fun. Although my dream would be the main Vsauce channel. Someone says Jan Misali and his seximal work, which is base 6. Yeah, I would love to collaborate with them. That would be super cool. We have a lot in common about loving base 6. And I'm sure I'm missing some, but it'll be fun to collaborate when more stuff as time goes on. I like talking, so I'll always be down to do types of collaborations that are either like me talking about something or me doing some weird type of experiment or whatever. I'm very open-minded. However, when people are around me, they better watch out for fire, clocks breaking, and so on. So, you know, invite me on your channel at risk. So, I think I'm going to log off in a moment. Thank you all so much for joining me. In a little bit, I'll have timestamps in the description here. In fact, sometimes as I'm typing up the timestamps, sometimes I will post it like edited as I go. So there should be the first few timestamps really soon, and then a few more, and then a few more, and so on. But those are so you have different chapters of different stuff that happened here if you want to watch and you weren't here, or for any future viewers. Mostly stay tuned for about 2 hours from now. The main channel will be dropping the most awesome, longest episode on there yet. I don't know about most awesome. There's a lot of awesome episodes on the main channel. We'll say tied for most awesome and wins longest episode on the main channel yet, called the Pandigital Paradox. So, love you all so much. Thank you for joining me, and I will catch you in the next one. Or, if you want to catch me sooner, post something on the Discord or subreddit. And I still need to go through more of the Discord subthreads. I haven't spent as much time responding or reading to those as I'd like, but I'll have more time in the future to do that. So, love all of you on there. Extra thanks to the people on Patreon, too. The people on Patreon have been getting their names in a bunch of descriptions on the main channel episodes, and I'm going to keep that up. The episode today will get my top tier people in the credits and the rest of the people's names in the description. So thank you all to those people and just all of my viewers who are my combo lords.